Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to discuss the issue that I raised during my maiden speech on the Senate floor in 1997, and that's the need to pass a constitutional amendment requiring a balanced budget. I'm disappointed that we were unable to pass a balanced budget amendment in 1997. I commend Senator Hatch for his efforts then. We got within one vote. We had 66 votes. We needed 67. Had we gotten that, we wouldn't be in this mess today. In 1997, our national debt was $5.4 trillion. Today, it's an astonishing $15 trillion. And without immediate action, that number will continue to increase to a level that is even more unsustainable. Time and time again, the federal government has proven that it's incapable of the fiscal discipline needed to spend within its means. Time and time again, the federal government has spent more money than we bring in. It has led to the situation we currently face, where we're borrowing more than 40 cents on every dollar we spend, and where we are being threatened with further downgrades in our credit rating. In fiscal year 2010, the government brought in slightly more than $2.2 trillion in revenue. At the same time we collected $2.2 trillion, we spent $3.5 trillion. In other words, we overspent by $1.3 trillion. That's 1,300 billion. That's an astonishing amount of spending, and it cannot be sustained. I encourage everybody to write these numbers out with all of the zeros sometime and see what we're talking about. We have a spending addiction that must be controlled. For years, we've tried to hide it, disguise it, or ignore it. We've acted like it's okay to keep spending money that we don't have. We no longer have that option. The world today is different than the world of 1997. We've seen riots in other nations whose fiscal situations were out of control. If we don't act now, we could see similar events in this country. We can either balance our budget or go broke, even more broke than we already are. Balancing the budget is not a revolutionary idea. Responsible families balance the amount they spend with the amount they make, or they go bankrupt. Businesses balance the amount they spend with the amount they bring in, or they go bankrupt. Most states have amendments requiring them to balance the amount they spend with their revenue. Wyoming's Constitution requires a balanced budget each and every year, and they do it. If people in Washington understood budgeting like Wyoming does, we'd be in a much better place right now. If families, businesses, and states can balance their budget, there's no reason the federal government cannot balance its budget. Now, there are two options that the Senate's considering today, and I'm pleased that there is consensus from both sides of the aisle that a balanced budget amendment would help us. Although that's the case, there is no doubt in my mind that the version introduced by Senator Hatch is far superior to the option of the version introduced by Senator Udall. The Republican balanced budget amendment gets to the heart of the problem, which is the need to rein in out-of-control spending. The Republican bill requires that we get spending down to historical revenue levels and force us to make the tough choices about what programs will no longer be necessary. It also prohibits Congress from raising taxes until a supermajority of members support such a tax increase. This is an important provision because the default solution for our out-of-control spending should be cutting spending, not raising taxes. This bill also goes into effect 5 years after ratification, which gives us the ability to transition to a balanced budget. I have a penny solution bill out there, 1 cent solution, where we cut 1% from every dollar we spend for 7 years. At the end of 7 years, the budget would balance. So it's not something that's undoable. We can balance a budget. While I'm pleased that my Democratic colleagues have a balanced budget amendment, the alternative they offered does not address this heart of the problem. It does not include a spending cap to ensure that we move spending to an acceptable level. It does not include a requirement for a supermajority to raise taxes, which will allow proponents of tax increases to more easily work to balance a budget on the backs of the American taxpayers. And the American taxpayers are only 49% of the people working right now. The American people are not the ones who cannot get spending under control. They should not see tax increases simply because Congress can't do its job. We need to pass the Hatch Amendment, and we need to pass it now, because I must also remind my colleagues that passage of a strong, balanced budget amendment is a first step. If we pass a balanced budget amendment, it still must be ratified by the states. 3/4 of the states have to pass it for it to become a part of the Constitution. That will take time. And with a $15 trillion debt, we don't have a lot of time left. There's speculation that 2 years might be the outside. This isn't going to balance it for 5. 2 will create some substantial cuts and tax increases. Passage of the balanced budget amendment by 3/4 of the states is a tough test because of the magnitude of what we're trying to do. It should be. However, we need to give the states this opportunity to force the federal government to come to grips with its finances, just as the state governments are required to do. Why should we give the states the opportunity to ratify a balanced budget amendment? Because I found that the best decisions are made closest to the people. State governments are closer to the people than the federal government, and they're generally better at addressing the needs of the people of their state. Giving the states the opportunity to ratify the amendment will bring the budget closer to the people and would allow the American people to decide how they want Washington to spend their hard-earned money. Most of the American people get it, and they're asking us to get it and do a balanced budget amendment. Amending our Constitution is an extraordinary measure. It's not something that I take lightly. We're in an extraordinary time. We have a budget deficit that's out of control and a national debt that's ballooning to levels that are unsustainable. We need a balanced budget amendment so that we can begin to get our nation's finances back in order. I commend Senator Hatch for his bill and appreciate him offering it. I hope that my colleagues will support it. It is essential for our country. I yield the floor.